We welcome you to the middle of the week. Glad you are with us as we continue to mow our way through the early part of the month of August. And by the time most of us were awake today, we learned of not one but two epic deaths from the world of sports, especially the world of college football. We begin talking about the late, great John Reeves, passing away at the age of 67, part of one of the most famous tandems in college football history. Reeves to Alvarez at the University of Florida, a first-team All-American, set countless passing records, 14th pick in the 72 draft, a member of the Florida Hall of Fame, and certainly a legendary figure in the storied history of the University of Florida quarterbacks. And then there was Ara Parseghian, who led the Irish back to prominence in the 60s and 70s with two national championships, one controversial in 66 and one cut and dried in 1973 when Notre Dame faced Alabama in a 1-2 shootout in the Sugar Bowl. He passes away after a long illness. He'll be remembered as one of the great coaches in college football history and truly one of the great gentlemen as well. David Israel covered Coach Parseghian not only at Northwestern, where he is a graduate, but in Chicago at the Chicago Tribune. And it is a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome David Israel to our program. I last spoke to him many, many years ago when he was covering the demise of another Notre Dame coach from his perch at the Chicago Tribune. But today, certainly a very sad occasion. David, very accomplished writer and producer. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our program. Good afternoon.
Well, thanks very much, Paul. Sorry for the reason I'm with you, but I'm glad to be with you.
Well, certainly you know that terrain, not only growing up as a sports fan, but going to school in the city of Chicago where Ara Parseghian was so well known and revered from his days at Northwestern and, of course, at Notre Dame. And I think you made a point to me earlier. You just can't look at him as one of the great college football coaches. He was so much more than that.
He was. He lived a truly meaningful life. He as a young, he accomplished his goals in football. He played college football. He left college to serve in the Navy during World War II. He then returned to college and played for the great Sid Gilman, who was one of the two great influences on him at Miami of Ohio. And the other great influence on him was Paul Brown, for whom he played both at the Great Lakes Naval Base during World War II, where Paul was coaching the service team, and with the Cleveland Browns. He played in the same backfield as, believe it or not, Otto Graham, who's probably also the greatest player in Northwestern history, and Marion Motley, who was one of the first truly great fullbacks, and probably the first great African American player in professional football history. And he got hurt, and his pro football career was cut short, and he went into coaching, and before he was 30, he was the head coach at Miami of Ohio, where he succeeded Woody Hayes. And then Ara went from Miami to Northwestern. By the way, I'm not old enough to have covered him when he was in Northwestern. I wasn't even a student there. I started at Northwestern when Ara was at Notre Dame, but I grew up in New York and New Jersey, and my father, who grew up in Brooklyn, who just died at 98 in March, so he was very much of the same era as Parseghian, by the way, which he would have corrected you. It's not Parseghian, it's Parseghian, because I got corrected more than once. Anyway, Ara, I started covering him when I graduated from Northwestern in 73. But I was a fan of Notre Dame because when you grow up in New York and New Jersey, where there really wasn't, especially back then, there wasn't very good college football. You had Columbia and Rutgers, and Fordham had already folded up despite the success of Lombardi and the 7 blocks of granite. Every good Catholic and every good Jewish kid grows up being a member of the Notre Dame Subway alumni. So I was a Notre Dame fan growing up, and back then when you could only get one or two football games a week on television, college football games, it was Notre Dame almost every week. And when I first started watching, they were not very good. It was the Terry Brennan, Q Harrick era, Huey DeVore that followed Frank Leahy's greatness. And then in '64, Ara left Northwestern and turned a defensive back, John Ewart, into a quarterback. And a team that had barely won a couple of games a year for close to a decade had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and went 9-1 in his first year. And then he went on to coach 11 more years, had a phenomenal winning percentage, and won 2 national championships. And I, from my way of thinking, in his era during those years, coaching from the 50s through the 60s, maybe or the late 40s through the 60s, there were maybe 7 or 8 coaches who belong on a pinnacle way above everybody else, college football coaches. And the first 3 are Ara Parseghian, Paul Bryant, and Eddie Robinson. And then the next echelon, just below them, are Bo Schembechler and John McKay and Darrell Royal and Woody Hayes. Then there are lots of other good coaches, but if you're going to do a Mount Rushmore, you would probably just use 3 heads, and it would be Parseghian, Bryant, and Robinson. And so as a 22-year-old, covering him, and also covering Coach Bryant, because their games against Alabama were a big deal, and I always made it my business to try to go to good games. And for some reason, I can't remember the name of the SID at Alabama back then, but he was a wonderful little guy. And he introduced me to Coach Bryant, who seemed to want to talk to me, and I got to sit in his office a few times and listen to him. I'm
guessing it was Charlie Thornton, but
it was Charlie Thornton. Okay, exactly.
Yeah.
And his office, I think, was in the basketball gym.
Yeah, that is correct.
In the basement. I remember it had cinder block walls. I'm going, what's Bear Bryant doing in his office?
No, you're. I'm dating myself, but I covered the end of Bryant. But nowadays I talk like I covered the beginning. But David, I'm so fascinated by so many things that you've said. And I know young people missed the greatest moments of Notre Dame football, certainly with Rockne and Leahy, and certainly Ara. But yeah, this wasn't. It wasn't so that this was incredible. I thought, and you referred to it, that he brought Notre Dame back. I mean, this program had slipped.
Leahy left for a couple of years and then came back and sort of helped it in the post-war period. And then when he left again, it declined precipitously. And at the time, I know you're in Alabama, but people in the South don't realize how dominant Northern football was then, especially in college, because of segregation. The SEC and the Southwest Conference were the 2 dominant conferences in the South, but they couldn't hold a candle to the Big Ten and to the Pac-8 because and to some of the independents like Penn State and Notre Dame and Pitt, because they had no black players. Duffy Daugherty, who coached the Michigan State team, was a wonderful little guy, and was the coach against Aaron, that famous 10-10 tie. If you look at his team, it's his best. Most of his great players were black players from the South. The Smith brothers, George Webster. I think Jimmy Ray's quarterback was from the South. I'm not positive. He even had a running back, Bobby Appiza, from Hawaii. And Ara had Notre Dame had, was where all the good Catholic boys went to play football, especially from the mill towns and the cities. But Ara had, the first, I think, fully integrated Notre Dame teams. And he had All-Americans like Alan Page, who to me is one of the great models of what an American should be. He played at Notre Dame, was an All-American, He was the best defensive player in the NFL, maybe ever, certainly in the top 10. Was the first defensive lineman to win the NFL MVP. Got a law degree while he was playing for the Bears and for the Vikings and the Bears, and then went on to become, for 20 years, a state Supreme Court justice in Minnesota. And he's just a phenomenally interesting human being, and he played 4 years for Ara at Notre Dame, or 3 years back then because you couldn't play as a freshman. And he came from Northern Ohio as Ara did. And Ara also started the first black quarterback in Notre Dame history, Cliff Brown. And he had some great quarterbacks. Cliff wasn't one of them, but he did start. But Ara had Ewart, who won the Heisman Trophy, and then had Terry Hanratty for 3 years, and then had Theismann for 3 years, and then had Tom Clements for 3 years.
Oh yeah,
that's a succession of All-Americans playing quarterback for almost his entire tenure at Notre Dame. And he developed very good wide receivers, Jack Snow, a guy named Paul Seymour, with Hanratty, they beat Purdue. I don't know if you remember this, in probably '66 maybe. They beat Purdue in a nationally televised game. Purdue had a great team. It was Bob Greasy's Purdue team, and I think it was Bob Greasy, and they beat Purdue on national television with Chris Schenkel calling the game. And the next week they were on the Hanratty and Seymour were on the cover of Time magazine. I've never forgotten that.
Oh my goodness!
As sophomores, because they were Notre Dame football players. That's the hold that Notre Dame had on the American sporting consciousness. And once Ara left, I think the mystique went with him, because Dan Devine was many things, but he had no mystique, and he wasn't a very nice guy. And he very quickly made Notre Dame just another football program, and it stayed that way for a while. And then Holtz kind of revivified it. And ever since Lou retired, it's just been another pretty good football team. Bob Davie and Charlie Weiss and Willingham, and I can't remember the name of the coach now.
Well, George O'Leary was there for a couple of weeks.
They have to have an Irish guy coaching the Irish. So
you're so correct. Finally, David, because his career, and I've never understood. Maybe you can explain as we wind up. He retired, I believe, after the '74 season, beating Alabama again, back-to-back years.
Beat him 2 years in a row in bowl games.
And then then for years there was speculation he would come back, and he never did.
No, football. He always understood football was a game. He always understood that his players should be students first, and almost all of them graduated. He had a phenomenal graduation rate. But the game consumed him, and I think it made him. He tried to explain. I was 23, 24 at the time. Actually, he gave me the story that he was going to retire, and I was too much of a knucklehead to write it. And then he called me up after the announcement, or he pulled me aside actually after the announcement. So why didn't you write the story? I told you. I said, well, I didn't know if you want. I just didn't get it. I was too young to understand it. And what he was telling me is it was just eating him up inside. It was just the physical demands on him. We're going to kill him, and he knew that. So he was 51. He was healthy. I think he'd been a head coach for close to 20 years. He wasn't going to do any better than he was doing. Once you've coached 11 years, you've won 2 national championships, you've competed or been close to probably 5 others. You're at the pinnacle. What more can you do? And it wasn't. And coaches didn't make the kind of money they made now. And he'd gotten lucky in some business deals. I know he was somehow involved with Marco Island, with the development of Marco Island in Florida, because I think they were named the Mack brothers, were Notre Dame alums, and they invited him into the deal. So he had some money, but he also was dedicated to other things. He spent the second half of his life raising money for very good medical causes, his multiple sclerosis and another very obscure disease that killed 3 of his grandchildren. And he was dedicated to that. So he had a really meaningful life trying to raise the money to cure those diseases, because they personally had affected his family. His daughter had multiple sclerosis, Karen, and his son Michael's children. I think it was called Niemann-Pick's disease, which is a very rare malady, and very, very few children suffer from it, but when they get it, it's fatal, and I think they're born with it. It's genetic. And there's very little research that before Ara, there was very little research into curing the disease because so few children are afflicted with it. So that's what I meant by saying he lived a meaningful life. I mean, he really dedicated himself to doing good work after he quit being a football coach, and using his name and reputation for good causes. I have nothing but respect for him, and a few regrets, like not being right enough to write that story.
Well, David, that was one of the few mistakes you made. Listen, I can't thank you enough. I'm just a couple of years younger than you, but when I started in this business, you were a guy that I studied and mimicked and wanted to be like. And, of course, then you went off to Hollywood and left us all behind. But thank you so very much for coming on. Thanks, Paul.
It's a pleasure. I love watching your show, and I still have a great affinity for Alabama football for some reason. And if there were actually a fourth face on the Mount Rushmore of college football coaches, I'd argue that Nick Saban should be the fourth.
Yeah,
face.
you made a couple of friends that you lost in Alabama a minute ago. David, we will love to talk again sometime. Thank you so very much.
Thanks very much.
Wow, what an incredible history of Notre Dame by David Israel, who covered him at the Chicago Tribune. He later became a Hollywood producer. At one time was also the coordinating producer of Monday Night Football. An extraordinary career as well. We will take a break. We'll talk to some people about both John Reeves and our Ara Parseghian after this. An incredible beginning to the program. We'll talk more about all of these issues and passings. Certainly a very tough day. Let's go to Glenn in Florida. Glenn, thank you. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Been a long time.
Glad to hear from you.
I hope you're well. I know you are.
Thank you.
I'm not going to give you my much anticipated, much hyped FSU Bama breakdown today.
We have time.
But in all seriousness, I'll give that to you later down the line. But today I want to talk about Coach Parseghian. And by the way, your last guest was fantastic, David Israel. I've admired for a long time myself. Unfortunately, he made me feel extremely old today, Paul. The first game that I ever attended, college football game that is, that I ever attended in person, was that 1971 game that David Israel just alluded to, when Notre Dame met Northwestern at ND Stadium, September 1971, and the first black quarterback, he was right, Cliff Brown, started under center. That gave me chills when he told that story, because I hadn't thought about that in quite a long time. That's pretty remarkable. Notre Dame, by the way, went on to win that game 50-7, just as a sidebar. And Ara, Paul, was not exactly known as a riverboat gambler. He was pretty straight to the vest. But one highlight I remember from him, kind of when he coached out of the box a little bit, was in that mythical or de facto national championship game in '73 in the Sugar Bowl, which I'm sure you recall, against Alabama.
Sure.
Tom Clements went back in the end zone late in that game and threw a pass down the left sideline to tight end by the name of Rodden Weber, number 91 in your program, to salt that game away against Bear Bryant and to give Ara a national championship. So much love for Ara. I love when he was on CBS as an analyst. He'll be missed tremendously. I was a Notre Dame fan growing up.
I think that was predicated by a controversial call by Bryant. Instead of going for it, he punted to pin them back in the end zone, which is what he got until that famous play.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Of course, Tom Clements went on to coach many, many years in the NFL. But I was a Notre Dame fan, Paul, growing up. I was a Notre Dame fan up until Florida State and Notre Dame played in that classic game of the century won in 1993. And I also heard you allude to the fact that we lost John Reeves today.
Yes, and again, and I'm sure you remember these early days. I mean, I just remember that passing tandem, Reeves to Alvarez, about as well as I remember my birthday. And I've spoken to both of them over the years, not lately, but that Florida offense was prolific, as you undoubtedly remember.
Well, I'll tell you what, real quick backstory on that. I do. My brother was stationed in the U.S. Navy here in Jacksonville at Naval Station Jacksonville. And Bob, my older brother, used to send me postcards, and he was kind of a quasi-Florida fan back in those days before he got his FSU stripes, if you will. And he used to send me postcards with what John was doing, Carlos Alvarez, and they had a great running back by the name of Tommy Durrance. And Tommy Durrance was kind of a dynamo in that backfield, and Carlos Alvarez was awesome. And John, I remember very, very well. But I've always respected him, and I always thank my brother for giving me those updates when I was just, 10, 11 years old. But it's amazing. This is an amazing day for me in terms of just kind of harkening back to the past, and I have to thank Israel for.
And thank you. Listen. I heard he responded to something we had put out earlier on Twitter, and I've not spoken to David Israel in 35 years, and personally, it was just to listen to him talk. Well, we could have talked for hours. He remembered everything in such great detail. That's what great journalism used to be about. Not 140 characters. We will take a break. We'll talk to another person who, reflecting today on the life of Ara Parseghian, Jerry DiNardo. He played in that famous game, I believe, and he played, of course, for Ara. Welcome back to the program. We are getting your reaction to the deaths of both Ara Parseghian and, of course, John Reeves, the former quarterback at Florida. And we'll also get your phone calls at 855-242-7285. Later in the program, we will talk to Matt Luke. He is the interim head coach. It was 2 weeks ago today. Hugh Freeze was still the head coach, and Matt Luke was one of his top assistants. And today things have certainly changed dramatically. Let's bring in Jerry DiNardo, who former Notre Dame player. He's also coached 2 different spots in the SEC at Vanderbilt and LSU, and now he's a Big Ten network analyst. Coach, always great to catch up, and I've heard some of your tales about playing for Coach Parseghian, but we'll start by just your thoughts today on his death.
Well, he's a great influence on me, and I think, everyone that played for him, and, we hear this all the time about the great coaches, and Ara certainly was a great coach, and, he lived a long time, Paul, 94 years old. He had a great career. He had some family tragedies with some health issues, but just a great person, and, my best goes out to his family.
You played on one of his most famous teams. Certainly in the South, it's remembered as his most famous team, the 2 teams that played Alabama, including Coach's final game. But the one that most people still talk about and still don't like to hear people talk about, you've lived in the South, including Alabama, is the 73 Sugar Bowl. Take us into that game, and what was it like being on the sidelines with Coach Parseghian?
Yeah, the uniqueness was, as you know, the winner was going to be the national champion, which, hadn't happened. It hadn't happened that often, and so we knew that whoever won the game was the national champion. You had Bear and you had Ara, 2 great coaches. I think 2 really good, talented teams. We had Casper and Tom Clements and Mike Fanning. We had some really good guys that could play, and Alabama was loaded. Paul, really, with my background, it was my first exposure to SEC fans, specifically Alabama fans. And it was something that, I had never seen before. We were all in the French Quarter. We shared hotels and those type of things with fans. But it was just a great game. Our motivation pitch was, what Ara explained to us, think of how many people have played college football and how few could ever say they won a national championship. And that was certainly a motivator on our sidelines, and I'm sure it was on Alabama's.
And then the next year it happened again, and I don't remember at what point. Maybe you do. You were on his team, of course, and a star player. But when did you learn that the coach was stepping down? Was it before the game? Was it after the game, the Orange Bowl game against Alabama?
It was. We had broke for Christmas. We all were home, and we hadn't flown into Miami yet, and we heard it on the radio. I mean, and it just broke. And, you know, of course, the legend is that Dan Devine's people broke it and so on and so forth. So, you know, I was a senior. It was my last game there, and, you know, I was surprised, but I was happy that I wasn't going to have to go through a coaching change, whereas the younger guys on the team were concerned about the coaching change, as all young players are. But that motivation, you know, different than the year before, because I think Alabama was number one at the time. We were ranked lower. It wasn't two equal teams playing. They were better than we were. But our motivation was, you know, we were going to make sure, we were going to try to make sure that Ara went out as a winner, and we win 13-11. So we won by 1 point one year and 2 points the next year.
And as much as we talk about Nick Saban trying to catch Bear Bryant, Notre Dame has made it a little bit easier for Saban. I'll say that, because actually, in fairness, even though Notre Dame won in '73, Alabama still claimed that national championship, but certainly they didn't get the one in '74.
Well, '73, as you remember, the AP didn't vote after the bowl game. So the AP, right. Alabama was ranked number one in their last poll. The UPI, which was the coaches poll, did vote after, and MacArthur Bowl was awarded as well in '73. But you know, Bear in '73, Bear came in the locker room. I mean, it was an incredible event. And the other crazy thing about those two games was the Orange Bowl at that time was the only one that had the team banquet after the game. So Sly Kroom was married, I was married. We wound up having dinner at the award ceremony after the game. The next night, I think, at Indian Creek Country Club, if I remember correctly. So again, my exposure to Alabama football came as a junior and a senior in college, and then obviously I learned more as I went on.
Coach, it's been a long time, and certainly Notre Dame has had its moments. Lou Holtz won a national championship, came pretty close to a few more. Brian Kelly played for a national championship, but some wonder, we had a guest on earlier who felt on one level some of the magic, maybe the mystique is the better word, went out of Notre Dame after Ara's era. Your thoughts, having played there, been a part of national championships, and certainly been a coach and competed on that level and on that stage, and being in that part of the country, now being an analyst?
Paul, I think at some point there were some advantages because Notre Dame was on TV more than everybody else because of NCAA rules. And then when the rules changed, because they had their replay on Sunday mornings, then when the rules changed, that leveled that playing field. I maintain this. I maintain as long as Notre Dame, being independent, has access first to the BCS and now to the college football playoffs, they can win a national championship. I think the only thing, even though the world has changed and a lot of things are different now about Notre Dame, as it is different about all schools in the environment we're in, the only thing that would prevent a place like Notre Dame winning the national championship is because if they would be penalized for not being part of a conference and not have access to the national championship. So until that happens, I think they definitely can win it. Now, you know, Brian played for it once. I think it was his third year, and you know, I believe they can get back there. So even though it's changed, it's not over for them, in my opinion.
Coach Jerry DiNardo joining us to talk about his coach who passed away earlier today. Many, many thanks. Always great to catch up.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
You bet. Jerry DiNardo talking about the death today of Ara Parseghian. We'll talk more about that. More guests to come, including the current Ole Miss head coach. Your reaction to what we've been talking about with David Israel and Jerry DiNardo. The phone number is 855-242-7285. Welcome back to the program. Glad you're with us. 855-242-7285. You are welcome to call in, including you, Lou. Mark is up next in Massachusetts. How are you, Mark?
Good. How are you? Just hearing that interview about Coach Parseghian, and the caller after that said it made him look old. This makes me look young. but that interview really helped me really think about how great of a coach and a person Coach Parseghian was.
Well, so true. I'm really glad to hear that, because that was my concern this morning when Mark and I were talking about this, that young people just really have no appreciation of, and again, I was growing up in this era, so it means more to me as a kid that he was a great coach than it would to someone who just heard his name.
Yeah, also, I'd like to talk about what your producer John Hayes said on Twitter, that I think he's wrong about, I think Barstool and Big Cat and PFT commentator do own the Mount Rushmore talk, and it's borderline disrespectful that he's saying that they need a trademark for that. Because
so you're calling John out for disrespect. First of all, I don't like anyone calling out Barstool either. I did one of my favorite podcasts ever with those guys.
Yeah, is John on? Can you get John?
Are you able to defend yourself here?
Well, first of all, that's why I always say that Twitter needs like a sarcasm font. I wish that we could type in italics on Twitter anytime we're joking.
Can't believe you're blasting Barstool, John.
Yeah, I tweeted at PFT and I tweeted at Barstool Big Cat. I said, these guys think they own Rushmore season. Sad. Show me the trademark.
Yeah, that man. You can't be joking around with
John, you're
Mount Rushmore
talking
talk.
to friends of mine now. Be careful.
Yeah, man, Barstool Sports is the way to go. And those guys know where it's at. Do you hear what they're doing for the opening week?
No, what are they doing?
Mount Rushmore?
Oh, so they're taking towels with Roger Goodell with a clown nose on them, and Dave Portnoy, El Prez, is planning to actually give them out to 30,000 fans.
Oh, wow.
So you're one of those brainwashed Patriots fans, huh, Mark?
Oh, I'm not brainwashed. I know the truth. That Roger Goodell is a terrible commissioner. Is that like contested these days?
I could tell you. I could show you 32 men who disagree with you.
Yeah, because there's nothing for they pay so much money to him.
Very old, white, and rich men.
You're a young, impressionable man, Mark. I'm just concerned about you. I just want to make sure you look up to people, the right people, not guys who put commissioners with clown noses on towels for a living.
Yeah, I know.
To win games.
You know, I just want to stop everyone for what this is the line of demarcation. John, you're what, 20-something years old?
Yes.
This is the moment. If you're Jewish, John, it's 13. You become a man. John has actually become a man today. He's quit talking like a millennial.
We're gonna have a party after the show.
I mean, a 15-year-old from Massachusetts has made John look like an old man.
Yeah, I think though that
And the sad part of this conversation is I'm siding. The old guy in the group is siding with the teenager.
So you agree that Roger Goodell is a bad commissioner?
I'm not allowed to talk about Roger Goodell.
I believe the NFL isn't paying your contract.
Yeah, no, I cannot afford to battle the NFL. I have too many other enemies out there.
Come on, Paul.
I will tell you this. A very close friend of mine knows Roger well and is close friends with Roger, and he would dispute a lot of what you said. But I'll let Stephen A. Smith worry about Roger Goodell.
Fair enough. Also, I was looking through the schedule like I always like to do right when I start fall camp, and I'm looking at Georgia's schedule. I really like this schedule for the Bulldogs, and I think every single one of those games is very winnable for them. If you look, what?
No, I agree. They do have a good schedule. Mark, thank you for the call. Do appreciate it. Ben is in North Carolina, and you are next up. What do you say, Ben?
Paul, I just want to say I'm thankful to even be on your show. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful you're on the SEC network. I'm thankful that you're looking healthy. John's looking healthy. Everybody's good. I can pay my bills and watch the SEC network. And I just want to be thankful for everything that we have going on today. And I was really surprised that the previous caller and you just said you like Georgia's schedule very much. I'm a huge Georgia fan, and I'm terrified. I don't know what's going to happen when they go to Notre Dame. I'm scared of Vanderbilt. I'm scared of Missouri. I'm scared of everybody. And I hope that the Dogs do good, but I am so thankful
here's why the schedule is, I wouldn't say it's a great schedule, but it could be worse. the crossover game is Mississippi State at home. That's where I always start. That's the game that can do you in. Just ask Tennessee. They have LSU.
Right.
Missouri has Auburn. Playing at Auburn, that's a game on the schedule. You have South Carolina at home. Kentucky. Those would be tricky games on the road. Certainly Tennessee is tough. Vanderbilt, if you're going to pick a place to play on the road in the SEC, Vanderbilt would be high on my list.
Sure, but they're on the rise. And I mean, we lost to them last year at homecoming.
Ben, if you're going to be the favorite to win the SEC East, you can't talk like 5 games is your goal. You have to embrace the moment. Okay.
Right. But
you can't be afraid of everybody.
Yeah, I know, but as a Georgia fan, you're really used to, we're gonna be this, we're gonna be that.
That's why you got a different coach there. That was the Mark Richt era. Kirby Smart's not afraid of anybody.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right. I mean, I would love for the Dogs just to rip through it and go, but many Saturdays I sit here sad.
Yeah.
Many Saturdays. But Paul, thank God, we're alive and everything's well.
Well,
and
yeah, I did like the
football.
first part of your call. We are pretty fortunate to be here. And
yeah, man, it's great stuff.
You be well.
And you're looking good, Paul. You're looking fit.
Thank you, man.
All right,
just look at me now on August 2nd and check back on September 2nd, October 2nd, November. See if I'm still looking fit. What do you think, Randy? No way. I tend to agree. I'm going to regret this looking fit line. Yeah. Paul, you're looking like you lost some weight. Get some rest. We'll take a break. More to come.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Second hour of the show, we spent a lot of time during hour number one talking about Ara Parseghian, who passed away, a longtime coach at Notre Dame with 2 national championships. John Reeves also passed away, the great quarterback from Florida. And speaking of Florida, we talked to Ed Aschoff yesterday about what's happening at the quarterback position.
He's starting to build that offense. In his vision, he's got 2 quarterbacks that he personally recruited in Felipe Franks and Kyle Trask. And talking to people in Gainesville, I know that we kept talking about Malik Zaire, and he's the early favorite. He's got to be the guy who's going to be the starting quarterback. The coaches and the players have been really impressed with what they've seen from Felipe Franks. They think that having Malik Zaire there on campus has really lit a fire under him, and he's performed a little better than a lot of people thought he would during the offseason.
Well, that was yesterday. Today, Jim McElwain, asked about the quarterback situation, said,
well, he's been, all indications. He is a great teammate. He's done a great job of getting along with and introducing himself and bringing a certain energy and understanding of what it takes. He's obviously on a mission, and he's here to help us win a game. And win a bunch of games. I think the one really good thing it brings great competition to the position. And I guess somewhere along the line at SEC Media Days, I guess I must have said that I knew who the starting quarterback was because somebody texted out or tweeted it out or something. I don't know that I said that, but I guess if I did, you had the scoop, didn't you? All right, good.
Okay, whatever that means. Okay, we had Malik Zaire conversation there. Well, let's get back to the show, and we will do so by taking your phone calls at 855-242-7285. We'll also talk a little bit later with Matt Luke, who 2 weeks ago was living life well as an assistant coach under Hugh Freeze. Today he is the interim head coach. Some people think pretty good shot of actually getting the job. Let's move along and check in with Channing in Tennessee. How are you, Channing?
Hey, doing well, Paul. Thanks for taking my call, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions for you about the Tennessee Vols. I've followed your show for a long time, listened to you and talking about Butch Jones. I've heard you say in the past that you wasn't sold on Butch Jones being a championship caliber coach at UT, but then a few weeks ago I'd read an article, or a few days ago, that you had said that you had heard Butch Jones talking about some of his accomplishments and what Tennessee had done since he'd been coach there, and your views had shifted a little bit. But I didn't read much of which way your views had shifted. Do you think Butch Jones is a championship caliber coach at Tennessee? Do you think he's the man?
Yeah, I'll briefly explain what happened. And listen, of all people, I'm not going to come after the media for taking things and running with it, because by now I should know that every time I open my mouth, someone will disseminate the conversation. I did say in an interview at Media Days what you quoted me as saying, and then when I was speaking with Butch Jones about 2 weeks ago, I simply said in a full disclosure, somewhat of a mea culpa, I said, I honestly did not realize your record in the last, I think it was 19 games. So that's where that came from. I think the answer to your question is I don't know the answer. You asked me, do I think he's a championship caliber coach? That is yet to be determined. That is a problem after 4 years, the fact that I can't come up with a good answer. Do I think he is a good coach? I do, but I also believe that this is a critically important year for him, not in terms of his job. I don't think there is an appetite in Knoxville to make a change, but I do think at the end of 5 years, we should all know whether he is a top-flight coach or not. Do you agree?
I agree, and I'm with you. I'm on the fence with him. Think about Vanderbilt last year. South Carolina, I can kind of swallow. But Vanderbilt beat us, and you feel like they're your stepbrother. You should be able to beat them with your second, third string. Injuries should not apply when you're playing Vanderbilt, in my opinion. I agree with you 100% on that. It's still up in the air on, if he's a championship caliber coach. I got a second question on you real quick for the quarterback situation at Tennessee. They're talking about playing two quarterbacks, and I've not heard anybody say whether or not they've thought about the reason maybe they're doing it. Tennessee's quarterback situation is three scholarship quarterbacks in Quentin Dormandy, Jared Garantano, and Will McBride. Do you think that it could be a transferring issue that they're talking about playing two quarterbacks? Because if you start Dormandy, let's say, and Jared Garantano gets upset about it, he transfers out, then you're laying on your backup being a true freshman in Will McBride.
Listen, I think you're right, and I said something last year about Alabama's quarterback situation, and I felt they were stringing Blake Barnett along, and Lane Kiffin let me know. He said, "You're completely wrong." I said, "Okay. Let's see what happens." So Barnett started the first game, and you never heard from him again. Was I wrong? No, I was right, because Barnett was out of there about 4 weeks later. They did not want to announce too early because they wanted to make sure they didn't lose anyone before the season started.
Right. That's where I'm at. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Great call. Appreciate it very much. John is up next. John, thanks. Good afternoon.
And Lane Kiffin.
Hello?
Hey there, John. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, and thanks for taking my call, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Well, I just wanted to make a statement about the Newt Rockney situation in Rushmore.
Yes.
Would like to know why we don't consider Mr. Paul Rebbe Bryant for Mount Rushmore.
Thank you. Great call.
Reggie, well, I'm sorry, John. You said I was listening to something, some feedback. Who did you say should be on Mount Rushmore other than Newt Rockney?
Paul W. Bryant. Mr. Bear?
Oh, no. Well, there's no question. And I think our guest did say that. He had Bryant on there.
Oh, did it? Well, I missed that, I guess.
Yeah, no. I think here's where people got confused, John. David Israel was talking about that era, and he mentioned Parseghian, Bryant, Eddie Robinson, and then I think he threw on Saban. You cannot do a Mount Rushmore of college football without Bear Bryant and Newt Rockne. If you leave one of those off, you might as well just blow the thing up.
I think here's where people got confused.
Thank you, John. No, listen, Mount Rushmores are great conversation on July days when there's nothing going on, because you can throw anything you want. But the problem with talking about the greatest coaches of all time is that we all have limited, unless you get some 95-year-old sports writer up here. Quit looking at me, okay? You can't have an honest conversation. I never covered or saw Newt Rockne or Frank Lehigh or Bud Wilkinson coach. I did see Bryant coach, so I know more about him than I do about the others. I know a lot more about Saban than I do about Bryant. So I feel I'm moderately competent to have that conversation, which I have done quite a few times. But we have books, and we have video, and we have experts, and we have historians, just like who are the best presidents? Well, Trump. Trump's the best president because he's no. I can talk about George Washington. I can talk about Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because there are volumes of books and data and libraries that scholars can go research, and it's the same way in college football. I have this conversation with young friends of mine all the time. Well, I don't know I don't know anything about that guy. I never saw him coach. Oh, okay, that's great. I never heard Frank Sinatra sing live, but I'm willing to bet he's one of the greatest of all time. Same for Justin Timberlake's not going to outrank Frank Sinatra on anyone's list. I'm sorry, just because you can go. Typical John Hayes speaking to me, because John Hayes is the person I'm talking about. We were talking about college basketball coaches a couple of months ago, and John told me, "Well, I never saw the guy coach." Not my problem, John. Justin Timberlake is the greatest singer of all time. We got that accomplished and stated. We'll take a break. And Jim from Tuscaloosa is the best caller. We will be back on Mount Rushmore Wednesday after this. We are glad you are here. And Jeff is next up in Chicago. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, I just wanted to say how thankful I am to have your good-looking and fit, trim face back on TV again.
Thank you. No, it's been too long.
It's been real. Yeah, no, it makes me feel real thankful. I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, well, we're thankful that you're thankful.
Hey, thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Hey, and inevitably this conversation comes up anytime Notre Dame football is involved, and I'm not saying you specifically or anything like this, but here's one thing in college sports that gets really tiring, to me at least anyway, is this whole notion of, oh, can this school win anymore? Can that school be as good as they used to be anymore? I mean, there's so many countless examples of, yes, all these schools can be good like they used to be, whether it's Notre Dame or whoever. But guess what? If you hire bad coaches who can't lead programs, then it doesn't matter what the name on the jersey says, then you're going to be bad. I mean, look at even recent examples. Look at the year Luke Fickell coached Ohio State, for example. They sucked, except, well, they did manage to beat Burt Bielema when he had Russell Wilson at quarterback. But, I mean, look at North Carolina when they were in basketball, when they were between Dean Smith and Roy Williams. They had Matt Doherty. They were absolutely terrible. And then they hire Roy Williams, and a couple of years later they
did get to a Final Four, I believe, in Guthridge's first season, but that was about it.
Yeah, that was right after Dean Smith retired.
Yeah, no, it was the next year, I believe, yeah.
Right. So then they had Matt Doherty. They had good players. They were, it was a total disaster, right? Just like, I'm not trying to harken back to the Mike Shula days or or whoever was coaching Alabama between Stallings and Saban. But guess what? I'm sure there were plenty of people who brought up the cliched, oh, can Alabama win anymore? Well, hey, guess what? They hired Nick Saban, and then, boom, they start winning a lot. I think there was someone on your show that brought this up recently. Oh, I think it was that guy. He looks like a moon pie, Matt Jones. I think that's who brought it up. But, can he look to his own school? I mean, they got rid of my favorite college sports coach of all time, Billy Gillispie. But as soon as they did that and they hired Calipari, hey, guess what?
Happened.
Good things started to happen again. Lo and behold. So I mean, it doesn't matter if you're Nebraska or Notre Dame or how long the time period has been. I think Tennessee was the other one that he mentioned. Hey, guess what? If Bob Stoops or Urban Meyer would have coached Notre Dame sometime between Lou Holtz and now, I've got a special prediction I'm going to make right now. They would have been pretty good if one of those guys had coached them along the way. So, I mean, I don't know. I love the Ara Parseghian talk, and I love hearing stories of yesteryear, but inevitably this tired old thing comes up about.
No, Jeff, I heard when before Saban got to Alabama, people were saying the program had no chance. That's why he wouldn't go there. I've heard that. That's the line that you hear all the time. There's no way so-and-so will go there because they have no chance of winning. Every program has a chance of winning with the right person.
Yes, exactly, Paul. I'm glad you agree. And once again, I'm glad to have you back in that chair. And as everybody else has said, you're looking very, very good, sir. Continue to keep it up, okay?
It's amazing, Jeff, what expensive makeup will do for someone. We have new lighting in here, too. You think that's it, Randy? Hope so. Let's check in with Clint, who is in somewhere, Kansas, I believe.
Hey, Paul. How you doing today?
Hey there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, too. Hey, what's the over-under of questions before somebody brings up the Deshaun's hand at Nick Saban's press conference tomorrow?
Oh, I think I believe it will happen, and I believe Saban will probably order the question beforehand. He's done that before, by the way, because I think he wants to go off on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I haven't been.
And by the way, he probably should. Good for him.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've been trying to call the last 2 days, but the phones have been lit up. But I know you kind of softened your opinion a bit on hearing the Deshaun Hand story with, falling asleep in the car. But where I guess and I was trying to get in Monday, but, since I've listened to the show the last 2 days, you kind of, basically have softened your opinion. But I guess where I have issues with, guys like Danny Cannell, coming on, and he hasn't been on the show, but basically he's been tweeting about how it's an SEC thing, and, this kind of stuff goes on countrywide, and, when, of course, it happens at Alabama, it becomes a national story, but I guess really guys like Danny Cannell, things have happened at Florida State, and we're not going to be all like Jimbo Fisher hasn't, been the all-time punishing and suspending players.
Well, no, I agree. We went through the whole 2013 season debating Jimbo Fisher's policy on discipline with Jameis Winston. That was incredibly embarrassing. Everyone's different. I said the other day I thought Saban was inconsistent. I think he has been, because if you go back in the past, he had one policy, and now he has a different one. But that also can be under the heading of evolving. He has a different view now, and he is not going to get any criticism because of his success.
Absolutely. And then I think, would you feel any differently, I guess, if the Jonathan Taylor and Cam Robinson, because he's been pretty consistent with his suspensions of players, and
Well, Clint, let me let you in on a secret.
Yes.
I love when fans call up and say, well, Coach Malzahn or Coach whatever He did the right thing. He suspended the player. These are university policies. You get a player like Jonathan Taylor who's accused of domestic violence. It's not up to Nick Saban to make that determination. That's a university decision. Those are automatic. And I just, of course, by the way, in this case, at least as of this moment, I believe Deshaun Hannon has not been suspended.
Absolutely. I haven't heard anything yet either.
You know the smart thing, and Mississippi State did this last year. Remember the player who got in trouble before he got on campus?
Yeah, the great defensive lineman.
So
Alabama was recruiting him, too.
They suspended him indefinitely, which doesn't mean anything. That's what I would do. I would always suspend the player indefinitely, and then you can bring him back before the first game. He missed one game, by the way.
That's right.
And it's just easier than the kabuki dance of, well, we're going to do this internally. I mean, Saban's prepared for tomorrow night. He's been in this cauldron a few dozen times. We'll take a break. More of your phone calls when we come back. Anyway, welcome back. Glad you are with us here on a Wednesday afternoon. We're getting your phone calls in at 855-242-7285. Let's check out Louis in Louisiana. Hello, Louis.
Hey, Paul. Good to talk with you again.
Thank you very much.
Paul, I'm calling. Pete Finney wrote a book. He was with the Times-Picayune. You might remember him.
Peter Finney, did you say?
Yes.
Oh, I think Peter Finney I know he passed away recently. Maybe one of the great sports writers ever. And I got to know him when I was living in Louisiana and afterwards, and just an incredible man.
Yeah. Okay, he wrote a book, 75 Years of LSU Football. And in that book, he talks about Ara Parseghian. Ike Cowrie was the man at LSU that was going to hire a new football coach. And his philosophy was he wanted to hire an assistant coach, not a head football coach. And Paul Diesel wound up getting the job. But Sid Gilliam contacted Ike Cowrie in that book and tried to get Ike Cowrie to hire Sid Gilliam to hire Ara Parseghian, I think, who was the head coach of Toledo.
Miami.
Miami, you're right. And Ike Cowrie would not hire Sid Gilliam, would not hire Ara Parseghian because he was a head coach. And in turn, he hired Paul Diesel from Army. And Charlie McClendon had a lot to do with Diesel getting that job because they were both assistants at Kentucky for
Bear Bryant.
Bear Bryant, yeah. And then also, when Diesel got hired, he was the offensive backfield coach for the Army, and the offensive coordinator was Vince Lombardi. And then there's another book.
That's
I don't know
amazing.
what book
That's really interesting. That's fascinating.
And there's another book, Paul. It was written by the Green Bay Packers players, and also they had a couple of paragraphs in there written by Lombardi's wife. And one of the things she was said in that book was that Vince Lombardi came home and said, "Can you believe LSU hired Paul Diesel?" Because he worked for Lombardi, and Lombardi was trying to get a head coaching job, but I don't think he ever contacted LSU.
That's no.
But I just thought that was
I do. I would be interested. LSU has some real misses, and of course Paul Diesel. I think that he won a national championship, didn't he, at LSU?
He won a national championship,
Yeah.
but he won it when. There's a lot to that story, and I'll make it quick.
By the way, I had lunch with Paul Diesel many years ago after he left LSU. I'm pretty sure he left LSU for South Carolina. Did he leave South? Did he leave South? Did he go to the Army? I'm trying to remember. There was a South Carolina Army triangle. I just don't remember which one was which.
Okay, what he did was his dream was to be the head coach of Army.
Okay,
but the American Football League started, and they started drafting all these players, and Army wasn't the same powerhouse it was because you couldn't get the players anymore.
Right.
And then he went to South Carolina, and then he later becomes the athletic director at LSU again.
He sure did. I tell you what, here's what happened. He left LSU to he left LSU to go to Army.
Correct.
Yeah, and then he went to South Carolina later on. But I remember after he was and by the way, when he came back, I think he was the AD there when Charlie Mack was fired, if I remember correctly, because I was moving I lived briefly in Louisiana covering LSU around that time. I met him later on. He was later the athletic director, I think, at Samford University in Birmingham at the very end of his career. And we had lunch one day, and you could tell that he knew he had made one of the biggest blunders in coaching history by leaving LSU to take that Army job. And it was a blunder.
Yes. Well, he told a few players that I knew.
Yeah, he also went to Army at a time when Roger Staubach was at Navy, if I remember correctly.
That would be close.
Yeah.
But you know what happened to him? He just thought Army was going to be the powerhouse that it was when Red Blake, I think, was the coach, was there.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
And then the American Football League started.
Yeah,
and they couldn't get the players like they used to get.
No, you're right.
But anyway, I just thought that was
that's a great story. No, you talk about names from the past. Louis, I think I think I said before somebody passed away. I think he passed away a couple of years ago. Yeah, he did. I had somebody passing away a couple of years ago that's still alive, so I'm always careful when I do that. I said so and so passed away. The next thing I know, somebody say, "You just said I died. I'm still here." I said, always check, be safe. Let's check in with Millie next, who is alive.
Hi, Paul. I'm so sorry about what happened to Ara Parseghian. I had an uncle who went to school there in the 1930s, and he used to talk an awful lot about him, about the school. And
right.
So it was kind of sad. So my condolences to Mark there and to Mike Golick, because he went to school there too, and to you and to the family, of course. And yeah, my uncle really loved it. He became a priest after he got out of and then he went to and did all sorts of goodies. But I'm just so sorry it just blew me away.
Well, he was 94. Let's be real here.
Yeah, I know. He was 94, and my father would have been 98 years old by now. But it was just one of those, if he would have lived, which he didn't. But I'm just so sorry about everything that happened, and I don't have much more to say. And you do look well, and let's hope you stay that way, okay? Let's not talk about death among any of the rest of us, okay?
You got it, Millie.
Oh, and I just wanted to let you know, you were talking about ages yesterday, about women and everything. I told you about my age up front. I was born October the 7th, 1946, and I don't mind mentioning my age. I don't think it's such a bad idea, and I think women are kooky if they don't mention their age.
Well, the only reason, and thanks for the call, the only reason I asked someone their age, because I thought we were talking. We usually, when they're very young or very old, I'll ask ages, because we're just trying to get some context. If someone's 95, I want the audience to know he's 95, and maybe that's why he's speaking a little bit slower, or if he's 14. Someone called yesterday, and I was convinced that it was a teenager. You were too. Yeah. So I just said, how old are you? And it was a lady, and she said 40. And it's always a throwaway question, like what year were you born? And if it's a 14-year-old, they go, she said 1977. I go, okay, 40. She was flattered, though, that I asked. Yes. Now, if she looked 16, that would really be a story. Yeah. Matt Luke coming up here in a couple of minutes. We look forward to that. Clay is in Biloxi. Go right ahead.
Yes, I was Ara Parseghian, and you mentioned the last time that he won a national title was the 74th Notre Dame. And I was curious, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Paul, that Notre Dame's only defeat that year was by the Ole Miss Rebels. Am I mistaken?
I tell you, I believe you're thinking of 1977.
Okay, well, I was in the
right, Mark? Ole Miss, Notre Dame's only loss that year was, I think, in Jackson against Ole Miss.
And do you remember the name of the All-American tight end from Notre Dame that year, sir? I cannot remember his name to save my life, but he was All-American, and Ole Miss beat them, and they won the national champion. But I appreciate you taking my call down
by
here.
the way, it was either 77 or 78, that game. I can't remember which year. 77? Okay. Yeah.
Well, it's an honor talking to you, sir, and greetings from Biloxi.
Thank you very much. Great to hear from you. How you remember these things, I do. Who knows how people remember sporting events. I still remember when Alabama led Clemson late in the national championship game. That's all I remember. We are going to take a break here, and we are expecting, you never know, Matt's a busy man, so we hope that by saying that Matt Luke will be on shortly, his new cadre of assistants will run down the hall and say, Coach, you need to be on the Finebaum show. Get off the phone with a recruit. Second thought, maybe you should stay on the phone with the recruit. We'll be right back, hopefully to talk to the coach. We welcome all of you back, and we are delighted to welcome Coach Matt Luke to the program. He is the interim coach. Coach, thank you very much for making the time. I can only imagine what your life has been like lately.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be on.
I know this has come up. You held a press conference and talked about all these things, but I would like to go back just for a moment. 2 weeks ago, you were Coach Freese's assistant. You've been under him for a number of years. How did you find out that your life was about to change?
Ross Bjork called me to his office on a Thursday about 4 o'clock, and he told me he was going to make a change and asked me if I was ready to lead the program, and I told him I was.
And following off that, I mean, things move quickly, and I know you obviously had great feelings for Coach Freese, as everyone in Oxford did. Have you been able to talk to him since then?
We had a brief conversation. It was not a long conversation, but the gist of it was he was just telling me to be myself, and that was he was just trying to give me that advice to be myself.
Coach, you have new coordinators. I mean, this is your staff now. A lot of new personnel on that coaching staff, and this is obviously a new adventure for you. Take us through your own process. You've been thinking about this now for 2 weeks. Practice is here. Give us the lay of the land.
Well, it starts with the coordinators, and just so excited about Phil Longo. I had the chance to work with him right alongside with him in the spring, and just really impressed with his talent. He's got a great grasp of his offense. He does a great job spreading the field, and he's going to have some weapons to work with. Shea and all the young receivers, and the line coming back, Jordan Wilkins coming back. I'm excited to see his offense with all the weapons. And then you move on to defense. I thought Coach McGriff did an awesome job of just having energy, and he kept it simple where the kids know what to do and they play hard. So I'm really excited about that combination. And I was able to make one hire with Jack Bicknell Jr. And that was an important hire for me just because he was coming over and taking over my room in the O-line. And I felt that was a huge hire. So now we have 3 guys on our staff with head coaching experience, with Coach Pivito, Coach Longo, and Coach Bignell. And and obviously him having all the NFL experience is something he can bring to the table in that room too.
Coach, this is your school. Family ties are deep. No one would ever doubt your passion for Ole Miss. Talk a little bit about relating the relatability to the team, because this is critical. These young men have been through a tough time just like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with me being the assistant head coach, the last 3 or 4 years, I've been in front of them. I have a comfort level with them. I've spoke with them. So I think they have a comfort level with me. And, I just really want to make sure I put the focus back on them. They've been through so much adversity, and, I think they just want to go out and play football. So that's my job, and the staff's job is just to, hey, let's keep the focus on the players and let's go play football.
I know you have much more important things to be concerned about than what happens after Thanksgiving, but you will be asked this question. You will be measured. Programs across the country, analysts will be talking about you in terms of getting this job. Number one, I'm assuming you want to be the head football coach on a full-time basis at Ole Miss?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a job that I've been preparing my whole life for. I've been coaching now 18 years under great head coaches. Phil Fulmer, David Cutcliffe, Mike McIntyre. I've been around a lot of great coaches, and 14 years of my career playing or coaching has been at Ole Miss, and so I feel like this is a job that I've been preparing for, and I want to take full advantage of this opportunity.
Has Ross or anyone else given you an indicator? Listen, if you do this, it will be yours.
No indicator as far as the number of games or anything like that, but obviously that I have a good, if not better, chance than anybody else because I'm doing a on-the-job interview, so to speak, and I'm excited about this opportunity and really looking forward to it.
I believe it was your dad who made some comment about what. Yeah, we like those kind of comments, Coach.
Yeah, we got to get my dad some media training, but he's really excited, and you could tell by the look in his face and it's well documented with him and my brother both being players here. And both those guys were my heroes and wanted to be just like them growing up. But now to have us all here together, it's really, really special.
So as this thing develops, I mean, there are 12 games, and I don't think anyone really knows. But there are precedents, and because you coach in the same division. But Ed Orgeron took over last year at the end of September. He got the job. Do you take anything from what he did and how he was able to embrace that team and how much those young men liked him and ultimately loved him?
Sure, I had the year. I worked under Coach Orgeron 1 year here at Ole Miss, so obviously, I have a lot of respect for him and what he was able to do. But I think with me, I have to take it one day at a time, one practice at a time, one game at a time, and really focus on this team and getting this team ready to play on September 2nd. I think if I do anything besides that, I think we're getting too far ahead of ourselves. We just gotta get this team ready to play on September 2nd. That's what I'm looking to do.
Coach, as you know, one of the tough responsibilities of being a head coach is dealing with discipline, and you've been faced with it pretty quickly too. Your players getting in trouble. Can you address that, and what are you or have you done?
Yeah, I got the information last night. We got all the facts. We visited with the players and their parents this morning, and I met with the team today, and we made the decision to suspend them for the first game, and also they got to do some community service, but they're still going to be practicing with them. They made some mistakes, but when you cross a line, there's got to be some accountability for your actions. But we're going to move forward from it, and they'll be practicing with us, but we are going to suspend them for the first game.
Having so many people in your family and mentors like you referred to earlier to perhaps lean on. I realize you don't have a lot of time, but how are you thinking and compartmentalizing and dealing with everything in front of you as you get close to that first game?
I think that's the biggest challenge is all the distractions and the outside noise. I think the thing I have to do is I have to be myself. I have to take from all the coaches that I've been around and all the great things that I've learned, but then have my own spin on it, and I have to be myself. I can't go out there and try to be somebody I'm not. I got to go be Matt Luke, and obviously take all the things that I've learned and then put my own stamp on the program. And that's been the biggest advice I've gotten from everybody is, hey Matt, just go be yourself. It's going to be good enough.
I imagine your family's pretty excited too.
No question.
Coach, we'll let you get back to work. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Thank you.
You bet. Well, great to have Coach Luke on, already dealing with some discipline issues. The two young men suspended for the first game. He did not waste any time on that. They had been picked up for shoplifting. Wow. Really impressed with him. I must say that when I first heard his name 2 weeks ago on Thursday night when Coach Freeze was dismissed, I said, it's hard to imagine him getting the job. I will say 2 weeks later, I think that lots changed. I mean, he's embraced it, not making any bones about it. He wants the job. He's got a lot of people pulling for him, and the Hugh Freeze love affair is over in terms of Ole Miss fans. The family is behind him now, and they want him to succeed, and he has given us every indication that he'll do exactly that. We'll take a break. 2 more hours to go as we continue on a Wednesday.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.